Good evening. I am back for Ask Me Anything Part 2. I really enjoyed last night. It was Ask Me Anything Part 1, and I didn't know it was going to be Part 1 last night, and I decided today to do Ask Me Anything Part 2. I'll tell you before I get into Ask Me Anything, this morning I picked up a basketball goal, from some friends, and I had to borrow a truck from a friend of mine to go get it. Went there, and there were three other guys there who helped me take the thing apart, lift it into the truck, tie it down, things like this. I tell you this because a previous version of myself 5 years ago would have felt like a big burden for having to ask for the truck, for the guys who had to help me get it, take it apart, get it into the truck. They were giving me advice on the best way to load it in the truck, the best way to tie it down. And me 5 years ago would have told myself this story. I'm a burden for having to ask for the truck. I'm a burden to the other guys who are helping me. I should know everything that give me advice on. I'm not who I should be. That's what I told myself a long time ago. I'm not who I should be. I should know all these things. I shouldn't need to ask for help. I should be able to do this on my own. I feel bad that people are asking me for help. While at the same time, several years ago, if someone asked me for help, I'd be happy to do it. So I was assuming that I was a burden if I asked people for help, but if people asked me for help, I never assumed that they were a burden. Fast forward to today, and the reason I'm sharing this is just simply because of the growth that gets to happen through life if we choose growth to happen. And this is what growth practically looks like for me. And it's not work on the outside; it's work on the inside, about how I see myself. I used to see myself as a burden. I think sometimes that belief still creeps in, but my default thinking now is that I'm a burden. So I asked somebody for a truck to borrow from Brandon. He said, "Sure, yeah, fine, go ahead and use it." And there were three guys there that were helping me. I didn't feel bad asking them for help, which maybe to some people blows your mind that would ever be something to feel bad about. But to me, asking for help was a really, really big deal several years ago. So today, they helped me, and I was on my way. And I didn't give myself a hard time for needing their help. That is what growth practically has looked like in my life. And it's exciting. It's exciting when those things happen. It's exciting when I can look back and see those things and go, I didn't used to be this way several years ago. I'm growing, I'm changing. And also looking forward, it's the opportunity of the possibility of growth going forward. So that was pretty cool. And then also another thing, right before I started my live here, I was scrolling through Facebook, and if you grew up in Christian circles similar to mine, you know the names Frank Garlock, Ron Hamilton, Patch the Pirate, Majesty Music. They were a big part of our lives growing up. Big part. Patch the Pirate was a big part of our lives growing up. Camp Cucahuaca Woods. I can still sing the Camp Cucahuaca Woods food song. If you know what that is, give me a like, because not everybody knows that, and that's a pretty cool song. Well, Patch the Pirate is nearing the end of his life, and as I got on Facebook just before I came on live here, I saw a video of Ron Hamilton laying in his bed. He's a couple days from passing away, and if you don't know who he is, he's a prolific writer of songs, Christian songs for kids, for adults. And it was a video of his son. I want to cry. I'm crying. It's a video of his son singing one of his songs to him. And somebody posted a comment, this is a man who has spent all of his life at the feet of Jesus, serving. I think what brings me to tears is because I'm moved so emotionally, because that is who I want to be. I want to be a guy that at the end of my life people are able to look not at me for my sake, but at me for the sake of knowing that I spend my life serving God. Without a doubt. And it just impresses me. I mean, it really moves me emotionally when I see someone who has spent their life serving God. And what an example. What a model of who I want to be as I serve God. That's why I'm on this mission of living my life in such a way that not just me, but I elevate others with me to live life in such a way that we hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant," when we get to heaven. Will Ron Hamilton hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant," when he gets to heaven in a couple days? I have no doubt he will. That's who I am being. That's who I want to be my entire life. And I think what moves me so much and compels me so much is that I have one shot to be a good steward. I have one shot to redeem the time. I have one shot to live life in such a way that I get to hear God say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant," when I get to heaven. And I don't think I see the weight of that every single day as much, but there are certain days where I feel the responsibility. To whom much is given, much is required. And I recognize that I've been given a lot. I stand on the shoulders of some pretty big giants. My parents are two of the main giants' shoulders that I'm standing on. And I've had some amazing teachers and professors. I've had some amazing mentors in my life on a personal side, on a business side, and a career side. And I get to do what I get to do. I get to be who I get to be because I get to stand on their shoulders. And as I'm standing on their shoulders, I want my shoulders to be available as not weak shoulders that somebody would fall off of, but as strong shoulders that somebody can stand on as they elevate their lives and elevate the people around them to live in such a way that they hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." So that's what I've been really moved by tonight, and I wanted to share that with you. Let's see. Matthew Tyson asked a question. He said, "Do you doubt that about yourself now? Yeah, what do you need to change to prove to yourself you are exactly what you want to become?" Sometimes I do doubt that about myself now. And I think there's one or two reasons. I'm going to think out loud for a moment. I think there's one or two reasons. One, for most of my life, I've been harder on myself. I've been very critical of myself. And so I wonder sometimes if I am being exactly who I need to be. And the default mode at times is to be critical of me no matter how much I'm doing, to be critical of me no matter how much of an impact I'm making. So there is that. And there are also times where I find there are times when I mindlessly scroll through Facebook, for example, more than I feel I'm being, not that scrolling through Facebook is a bad thing at all. What am I trying to say here? I think there are times that I scroll through Facebook more than is being a good steward of my time. I'll put it that way. There are books that I would like to read that I'm not reading. There are things that I like to learn that I'm not taking the time to learn. Does that mean I'm not being a good steward? Well, I'd love to hear your opinion too, if you're watching. There are areas in my life where I see that I could continue to get better. I could continue to improve. in being a better steward. But what I see that I'm doing is I'm comparing who I could be as a good steward tomorrow to who I'm being today. And I'm comparing myself against a future self that doesn't exist yet. And so, well, that's really a theory way of talking about this. I think I also compare myself to others who I see who have done more than me, who have had a bigger impact than me. And I compare myself to them without realizing I'm comparing myself to them. And I use them as a standard and I compare myself against them. And for me, two things happen when I compare myself to other people. Either I rank significantly lower than them, or I rank significantly higher than somebody. And there's wisdom in looking at people as a model to follow. There's wisdom in looking at people as a model of who not to follow. There's not wisdom in comparing myself to them. And I find myself quickly switching between finding somebody as a model to follow and then comparing myself against them. So who do I need to be? Let me come back to Matthew's question. Who do I need to be? Or what do I need to change? Who do I need to be in order to become exactly who I want to become? I think one is the intentionality of every morning saying, today I'm living with the intention of being who I want to be today. Today I'm living with the intention of being a faithful steward. And throughout the day, using it as a mile marker, using it as a benchmark. Is this being a good steward of what I've been given? Is this being faithful with what I've been given? One thing that's really, really helped me in staying on track, staying on the path of being a good steward, is the people that I have surrounded myself with, or that even God has put in my life. And I have more people in my life mentoring me. I have more people in my life speaking truth into my life than I ever had in my life before. Well, maybe let me even rephrase that a little bit as I'm thinking about it. There's more people in my life now that I'm willing to listen to. There's more people in my life right now that I'm willing to be mentored by than I ever have before. Because I think honestly in the past, this is really interesting to think about now that I'm thinking about it this way. I think in the past, there's been just as many people around me to mentor me. There's been just as many people around me to get wise counsel from. But go back to what I was talking about at the beginning. I felt like a burden if I asked somebody for advice. I felt like a burden if I asked somebody to meet with me, to mentor me about something. And so I wouldn't. I would just isolate myself because I should know this on my own. These are the stories I told myself. I should know this on my own. I should do this on my own. I should have already known that. And so I wouldn't be vulnerable enough to ask for the help that I desperately needed at the time. And I think that the primary shift that occurred that allows me to access the mentors that are around me, to access the wisdom that is around me right now, is knowing that it's okay to ask for help. Knowing that here's the distinction. It comes back to this one. And if you've known me for a while, you've known this one. Human doing versus a human being. I used to look at myself for most of my life. I used to look at myself as a human doing. If you're not familiar with this distinction, it's the one around a human doing. When I see myself as a human doing, I see everybody else as a human doing. And we just become the summation of everything we've achieved. And we're either perfect as a human doing or we're imperfect. We've either got it all together as a human doing or we don't have it all together as a human doing. And as a human doing, I wanted to put on a face that I was a really, really good human doing, that I had it all together and I didn't need help. When in reality, because I was not a human doing, I'm a human being, I didn't have it all together and I needed help, but I wasn't willing to show up that way for myself. I wasn't willing to show up that way with others. And so the distinction was, and my coach Tracy taught me this distinction a couple years ago, and it's been life-changing for me. I'm a human being. You're a human being. We are all human beings. And when I start seeing myself as a human being, I start seeing everybody else around me as a human being. And it's okay to be imperfect, because human beings are imperfect. Human beings need help. Human beings are meant to relate with each other. Human beings, the way that we're created by God, are meant to help each other. I think about one of the main characteristics of God that Paul talked about was, Paul said, "Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, who took on him the form of a servant." If we weren't meant to help each other, if we weren't meant to need help from others, then why would have Paul, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, been telling us to be servants for each other? I'm seeing that much more clearly right now than I've ever seen this before. We were made to ask for help. We were made to respond to help, human being to human being connection to human being connection. Christ modeled being a servant for us because he expected us to be servants for each other and for other people to be servants with us. And when I operate as a human doing, there's no interest in serving for the other person. There's a lot of interest, at least there was for me, about being seen as somebody who helps. Because I wanted to be seen as a person who helped. But not to be a model for others to follow, but because I wanted to feel important by helping others. That's a very self-centered way of helping others, and ultimately in the end, while there might be some surface level help, when somebody's helping you because they feel better about helping you, you can tell. And I spent a lot of my life helping others because I wanted to feel good about helping others. I wanted the recognition of being the helper. I wanted the recognition of being Derek's a servant. Oh, what a good guy. And really, in reality, what I was doing was just putting all the notches in what I thought was, I'm a really good human doing. I'm really good. Look at all these achievements. Look at all this servanthood. Look at all the ways I'm being a servant. I think about Matthew 5:16. Let your light so shine before men. Like, that's a command. Let your light so shine before men. Do things with others. Do things for others. Don't hide what you have. Do things for others. Let your light so shine before men. The next part is incredibly important. So that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. I also spent a lot of my life being embarrassed, even having some shame around the gifts that I excuse me. Let me go back before I got choked up. I spent most of my life being embarrassed and even having some shame around the gifts that I had. I told myself I'm very different from others, and that's not okay. It's not okay to be different than others. I grew up in Africa, and I grew up in Kenya. So in Kenya, my skin color was different than everybody else's. For the first 19 years of my life, my accent was different than others. My culture was different than others. My religious, if you want to call it religious beliefs, were different than others. I felt that everything about me, the standards that my parents had for our family, was different for others. So the story I told myself is everything about me is different than everybody else, and that's not okay. So I lived isolated. I lived closed. I lived not wanting to show people who I was because it was different. And I most of the time I never went full out with the gifts that I was given. Even in playing piano, I would hold back in my academics and using my academics, using the brain that God gave me. I would hold back at times because I didn't want to what I felt was stand out so much. And it's funny, even describing this, I sometimes have a hard time saying these are the gifts that I have. Now I just lost my train of thought. I would hold back. So there was embarrassment and shame even around my gifts. And what I'm seeing in Matthew 5:16, it says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works." The intention is that people see the gifts that God has given us. The intention is that God gave us the gifts He's given us to be seen by others. I was reading Intentional Living by John Maxwell. I want to see if I have it here. It's not here. It might be over there. John Maxwell is really clear about the gifts that he has. He's an excellent communicator, both in speaking and writing. He's excellent at leading other leaders. And in his book, Intentional Living, I'm actually going to see if it's right over there real quick. No, it's in another one of my piles of books, or bookshelves of books. But in John Maxwell's book, and if you read his other stuff, he doesn't hold back about the gifts he was given and how he's used them to influence and lead others. And my coach, Tracy, texted me as we were going through the book together in a book club, in a mastermind, and she said, "Do you see John Maxwell being proud about the gifts he's given as he talks about them? Do you see John Maxwell as boasting about what he's been given? Or does he own the gifts he's been given? And he talks about how he uses them to influence others." And in that question, I saw that John Maxwell fully owns what he's been given. And nothing in the way he's writing comes across as bold, arrogant, cocky, proud, egotistical at all. It comes across as humble and confident in what he's been given. John Maxwell is one of the guys, specifically, that I want to model. Actually, let me take full ownership of this. He's one of the guys that I am modeling my life after. I see myself on stage someday with John Maxwell speaking at a conference. That's really exciting to say, by the way. But John Maxwell's a guy who said, Matthew 5:16, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify God." I am living in such a way, and I intend to live in such a way for the rest of my life, that people see what I do. People see the gifts I've been given. I use them in a way that other people see them to glorify God. And sometimes there is still the residual belief from the past that seeps in that says, hold back. Be embarrassed about those gifts. Don't go all in. And I mean, reminding, going back to Matthew's original question, am I being a good steward today? I think what I see sometimes, what I experience sometimes, without really knowing how to put it in words all the time, is that sometimes I feel embarrassed by my gifts. Sometimes I feel embarrassed about how deeply I think and how much I care. I remember very, very vividly, I think two of my gifts that I have is that I care very deeply about personal connection, personal relationship. And I think slowly and I think deeply. And I remember in my mid-20s, I was working with a coworker, and we were talking about this. And he said, "Derek, you care too much." And so my solution was, because I felt very stuck in my life back then, because I wasn't using the gifts I had. So my solution was, instead of using the gifts I had, to actually go further away, like Jonah did. He went the other way, to go further away from the gifts that I had. I said, okay, I need to stop caring as much, and I need to stop thinking so deeply about stuff. When really I was running away from what God had given me. And so I am owning. I care deeply about one-on-one connection. I think one of the things that allows me to coach at the level that I coach, or the impact that I coach, is that I care very deeply about one-on-one personal connection. I can sit and I can listen to what people are saying, and in listening to what they're saying, I can listen to what they're not saying, because I care. I listen deeply, and I think deeply. I'm able to hear what they're saying and get to the bottom, get to the root cause of what's happening for them. So, what I'm seeing in this conversation, as I've talked around in circles, I feel like, but this has been very insightful for me, and I hope if you've been listening and following along, that something's resonating with you here. Is that two things I'm going to draw out for me? Two things. One, God modeled servanthood for us. God modeled being a servant for us because he intends for us to serve others, and he intends for us to be in a way that we need to be served by others. That when we ask for help, when we ask for connection, when I ask when I ask for advice from somebody, it is not being a burden. It is actually allowing them to be a servant like Christ was a servant. That's number one. We were meant for service in a full circle, to be served and to serve. And number two, from Matthew 5:16, is God gave me the gifts he's given me. Piano, communicating well, caring deeply, listening thoughtfully, thinking deeply. He gave me those gifts to be used. He gave me those gifts to be seen. And if my gifts aren't being seen, then I would say I'm not letting my light shine. And if my light doesn't shine, then how can people glorify God through my life when God gave me the gifts for the sole purpose of him being glorified? Let me see. Matthew, you wrote this a while ago, and I'm coming back to it now. You said something interesting. Well, you said, that's a great answer. Thank you. You said something interesting. You said, I compare myself to my future self. You also said, I compare myself to what others before me have done. The best piece of advice you've ever been given, the best piece of advice you've ever given me is to live in the now. Become who you want to be today, and you'll be who you want to be as your future self. Yeah, that's beautifully said, Matthew. And I remember the conversation we had when we were talking about creating a future. And I'm backing up because I need some more room here for this. And we were talking, and I'll tell you why I remember this so vividly is because I needed to hear it then, and I still need to hear it now. Because some of the best questions that I ask in my coaching, some of the best advice that I give in my coaching is the advice that comes from within me, because that's where I am. But it's, how do we create our future? How do I be that person out there? And it's this piece that resonates so deeply with me right now. Is I create my future by choosing what I do now, and now, and now, and now. I create my future one moment at a time. And I'm using the word create on purpose, because the future can either happen to me if I just sit back by default and let happens what happens. Let happen whatever happens. I can play this passive role in life, and the future happens to me. Because life is sometimes like this travelator. If we're not careful, we just kind of sit back and life will take us on its way. And what happens, happens. Or we can take a moment of time that hasn't happened yet, and I can choose to be in that moment. I can choose what I do in that moment. So how do I create my future? How do you create your future? One moment at a time we create, now and now and now. And really the future is just a bunch of now moments stacked on top of each other. We get to create who we are in the future. So yes, I am being a good steward today. And not just today, in this moment. I'm being a good steward in this moment. I'm being a good steward in this moment. I'm being a good steward in this moment. Now, if I continue that repeatedly for the rest of my life, then I will have stacked on endlessly being a good steward. And the accumulation of my life will be being a good steward because I created that one moment at a time. Welcome. I see a few others watching. Corey, Cindy, Ron was on here a little bit ago. Hello. If you have a question that you'd love to ask, what is it? I will do my best to answer it as vulnerably as possible. Let's see. I have a little bit of time left here. Katie is on her way back from the wilds, and the kids are in bed. So I have a little bit of time tonight to talk. I enjoy talking. I enjoy thinking through things. I enjoy the insights that come through these videos. You know, something interesting about these videos is I started doing these daily videos because one of my friends said, Derek, I'm thinking about doing a video every day. And I said, if you do a video, I'll do a video, and we can be accountable with each other. So there was the commitment on the front end and the accountability on the back end that we're doing this with each other. And oftentimes, I think about doing things for others. I'm doing these videos for others. I'm doing these videos so that other people can learn through my life. And what I'm seeing is these videos, I think, are 100 times as impactful to me as they might be for you, because more and more as I'm being more authentic and more vulnerable and opening up more of these videos, I'm finding that the insights that I'm gaining through these are quite powerful and life-changing. This conversation, if you go back and watch this conversation, if you've not been here for the whole time, it was very, very insightful for me about owning the gifts that God has given me. And letting other people see the gifts that God has given me so that they can glorify God through them. So a couple questions. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in. Otherwise, I'm going to continue through this Rich Litvin questions. And again, these questions are pretty powerful questions, but really what's more powerful about them is the answering of them. And so when this video is done, I'm going to put the link to these questions in the comments, and read through the questions. Pick one of them. I mean, you can go through all of them, but pick one of them, the one that resonates most deeply with you, and really think about the answer to it. So this question is: make a list of all the goals you have right now. So I won't make the list, but I'll think through the goals I have right now. Which one, if you focused on it, excuse me, which one, if you focused on it, to the exclusion of every other goal, would be most likely that you would achieve over all the others anyway? I think I butchered that question. Let me read it again. Make a list of all the goals you have right now. Which one, if you focused on it, to the exclusion of every other goal, would be most likely that you'd achieve over all the others anyway? So which goal, of all the goals that I have, if I focus on it and didn't focus on any of the others, would be the one that I would achieve anyway? It's interesting as I'm thinking through this. My mind's focusing on all the goals that I haven't achieved in the past that I've wanted to achieve, and it's almost as if there's this, by default, there's this blocker about thinking about the goals that I probably will achieve anyway. So what will I probably achieve anyway? I think one goal that is really important to me is to maintain a balance between my work, my career and business life, and my home and family life. To say, if I'm getting off at work at a certain time, that I get off of work at a certain time. That if I say I'm not going to do any work on Saturday and Sunday, that I don't do any work on Saturday and Sunday. That is a goal that I have. It's a goal that I've had in the past, and I think that one, if I focus on that with the exclusion of all other goals, I would accomplish that goal. That I would honor the boundaries that I've set up for work and for my business with my family life. And I say that knowing that there are times in my life, I say times in my life as if it's generic. Let me be really honest. A couple weeks ago, I told Katie I'd be done at 5 o'clock. We had choir practice, and I'll explain why this was a big deal. We had choir practice at 6 o'clock. I needed to pick up Briley. She was coming from school because the kids were at volleyball camp, I think. So there are lots of different irons in the fire, and things needed to happen at a certain time so we could get to choir practice by 6 o'clock on a Monday because we were practicing for our Easter program. And Katie told me on Sunday, she said, it's really important that you get done at 5 so that we can make sure all these things happen. Briley gets picked up, gets a bath, we get dinner, and get to choir on time. And I said to Katie on Sunday, I said, I hear you. I will be done at 5. And I was done at 5:10 on Monday. Now, it was 10 minutes. 10 minutes is not going to stop the world. 10 minutes is not going to blow up somebody's schedule. So it wasn't about the 10 minutes. But Katie was very kind in how she talked through what she was feeling about me not being done at 5 when I said I was going to be up at 5. She said, Derek, you said you heard me. You said you're going to be done at 5. I told you this was really important for our schedule that we get done at 5. And you said you heard me and you'd do it, and you did not do it. And she very, very kindly and very firmly, in a way that I needed to hear, said, Derek, you weren't a man of your word. And that hit me right deep down. Guys, that's the type of wife that you need. Wives, that's the type of husband that you need, that can love you in such a way that they say, this is what I see happening, and I know you can do better, and I want to encourage you to be a man of integrity, to be a woman of integrity. So she said, you're not being a man of your word. And it wasn't about the 10 minutes. It's about the fact that I said, I heard you. I know it's important to you, and I'll do it. And I did not do it. So while I say that the goal that I'll probably achieve anyway is honoring that boundary, I know that 2 weeks ago I did not honor that boundary, and it was a really big deal. But it exposed this area of my life that I am working on being integrity. I am working on being a man of my word in this way. So the next question is, so let's say for example, here, because this is a series of questions, that the one goal that I'm going to achieve is honoring my boundary. When I say I'm going to be done work, I'm done work. What will you do to ensure you make this happen no matter what? So I don't want to just give a quick answer. Let me think about this. What will I do to ensure you make this happen no matter what? I think part of why sometimes I am not done when I say I'm going to be done is because whether I'm in a coaching session or I'm in a meeting or I'm just talking to somebody in the hallway, it feels very vulnerable for me if I'm talking to somebody in the hallway. Let's bring up this example. And I know that I need to leave work at a certain time in order to get home at a certain time. To say, hey, I got to leave in 3 minutes just so we can wrap this conversation up. Let's go back to being a burden. Most of my life I felt like I was a burden. And I feel like when I tell somebody in the hallway, I've got to go in 3 minutes, we need to wrap this conversation up, I feel like I'm being a burden. Because I feel like I'm pushing them away. And So it's that piece of realizing that in order to honor my word with my family, with my wife, what I need to see is that to be a man of integrity, it's not being a burden to say, I need to go in 3 minutes. It's not a burden at the beginning of a session, a coaching session, to say, I have a very hard stop at the end of the hour. And so if we get to the top of the hour and we have unfinished business, let's put a pin in it and pick it up somewhere else. It's not being weak to say, I have to go. It is being a man of my word. It is, and I even realized that as I talked about being a man of my word, I sat up in my chair. Because when I think about being a man of my word, I think of standing firm, standing straight, standing tall, saying, this is what I'm standing by. I am protecting and I'm guarding my word no matter what. So I think I've seen it as a sign of weakness. I think I've seen it as a sign of weakness isn't the right word. I've seen it as being a bother to say, I've got to go. And instead of seeing it as being a bother, what I need to see it as, what I need to see myself as, is I'm a man of integrity. It's not a bother to be a man of integrity. I am choosing what's important to me. I'm choosing to create my life. I'm choosing what I do with my time. That is not being weak. That's not being a bother. That's not being a burden. That's not offending somebody. Maybe it will offend somebody. Maybe somebody will feel like they were bothered. I can't be responsible if I'm honoring my word. I can't be responsible for how somebody feels about that. I want to be aware and cognizant of how other people feel about it, but I don't want to make my decisions based on how other people feel about what I say. Because what I want to say and what I want to do, I want to be based on who I am. And if I'm being a man of my word, then no matter what, if I say I'm going to be home at this time, if I say I'm going to be done at this time, then I say, I got to go. Let's catch up this conversation tomorrow. Let's put something on the calendar next week to finish this conversation. Because I can either choose to compromise my integrity by favoring the other person, or I can choose to honor my integrity by honoring who I'm being. So the question is, I want to see what it says here. What will I do to ensure I make this happen? Honoring that boundary no matter what. I'm a man of my word. That's who I am. I'm going to honor the boundary no matter what. That's who I'm being. It's not a burden to be a man of my word. It's not offensive to be a man of my word. If somebody finds it offensive, that's okay. I'm a man of my word. I'm standing for who I'm being, and I won't apologize for that. What are you willing to sacrifice to achieve your goals? What am I willing to sacrifice to achieve my goals? What am I not willing to sacrifice? It's interesting. I had this conversation. I have career goals. I have business goals. I have entrepreneur goals. And I was having this conversation with one of my friends, with Kyle. He's got 4 kids that are roughly around my kids' ages. And we were talking about the things that we could do with our careers. We were talking about the things that we could do with our lives. We were talking about the things that we could do to create more revenue in our lives. And we both recognized that to do those things in a bigger, significant way, it would require us to sacrifice time with our families. And I said to Kyle, it's not that I can't do that, but I will not do that. I will not choose my career over my family. I will not choose the growth of my business. I will not choose my entrepreneurial journey over my family. It's not that I can't do that, because I could. I will not do that. So I'm not willing to sacrifice time with my family. I have, let me see what Corey says here. I have found it very hard to tell other people no, but I find myself telling my family no, and it has been eating on me. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Corey, on that. My coach Josh said to me the other day, because we were having a conversation about boundaries. He said the easiest person to cheat is yourself. We're talking about time. How do I handle time? He said the easiest person to cheat is yourself. In that, like for example, and we were talking about if I have something on my calendar that's just me sitting down and doing something, I can blow that off pretty easily. But if I have a meeting with somebody else, I don't blow that off because I'm not going to cheat them of the time that I said I'm going to spend with them. But I cheat myself of the time that I say I'm going to spend with me, working on my stuff, working for my stuff. And yes, every time we tell somebody no, we're saying yes to somebody else. Every time we say no to an opportunity, we're saying yes to an opportunity. And really, it comes down to a question of who we're going to say no to and who we're going to say yes to. I am living in such a way that most of the time, and I'm growing in this still, I'm living in such a way that I choose to say yes to my wife. I choose to say yes to my family, and whatever the things that I'm saying no to, in order to say yes, I say no to them. And sometimes I actively have to say no to them. No, I've got to go. And sometimes it's just a passive no. Nope, I'm not doing that. Can't do that. So we're always saying yes to somebody or something. We're always saying no to somebody or something. It's just a matter of choosing who are we saying yes or who are we saying no to. My kids will be 12, 10, and 8 this year. Brady will leave for college in 7 years? Somebody said to me several years ago, the days are long and the years are short. I remember that very often. And I have seen, growing up in the ministry, I have seen missionaries, I have seen pastors, I've seen evangelists who grew large ministries at the expense of their family. I've seen missionaries who have been I'm going to use air quotes, the celebrity missionaries. They've been the missionaries that everybody knows. They've been the missionaries that everybody comes to do missions trips with. They've been the missionaries who get a lot of the attention because their ministries are big. They always have stuff going on, activities, events, people coming to church, people getting saved, all this stuff. That's not bad stuff. And I've been close enough to them to see the impact it had on their kids because I was growing up with their kids. And it had an impact. When Brady graduates from high school in 7 years, I will never be able to get these 7 years back. When I walk my girls down the aisle to get married, I don't know, 10 to 15 years, I will never get the chance back to be their dad before they were married. I will never get the chance to teach them the values and the principles and the morals that I want them to take into life and teach to their kids who will be my grandkids. So what am I not willing to sacrifice? I am not willing to sacrifice the values, the principles, the morals, the time that I get to spend with my family in order to grow my business. I will not. And I don't say that in a cocky, arrogant way. I say that with a matter of heartfelt conviction. God bless Katie and me with 3 kids and a foster daughter. the last 18 months. And for a few more months, I think. I intend to steward my relationship with them and the Father well. I don't want to be the guy who gets all the attention because his business is growing, because his career's taken off, because he's made a lot of money, because he drives nice cars and nice trucks, and yet has a family that's fallen apart. My career growth will not be the reason that my kids do not do well. That's a commitment I make every single day. I'm not willing to give that up. This is a vulnerable question to think through, and I didn't prepare any answers to these questions. These are questions that I chose not to prepare for them. What are the three biggest reasons your life, business, or impact isn't yet where you want it to be? What are the three? I'll just go for the one. What is the biggest reason your life, business, or impact isn't yet where you want it to be? This is a tough question because it requires some really honest introspection. And I would encourage you, as you're watching live or on the replay, to answer this question for yourself, because this is a really eye-opening question once you see the answer for yourself. And you can share it in the comments or not. So Derek, what is the biggest reason why my life, business, or impact isn't yet where I want it to be? There's this idea about competing interests. And let me share what that means if you haven't heard that concept before, is that there's often multiple things going on in our lives that compete for what we want to do. For example, two competing interests that I have are growing my career, growing my business, growing in my entrepreneurial journey, and being the best dad I can be for my kids, being the best husband I can be for Katie. Those are competing interests because I have 24 hours in a day and that's it. And I could either spend an hour spent in my business and my career is an hour not spent with my family. And obviously there has to be a balance because I have to go to work in order to provide and be a good dad and husband. But there is a point where there reaches a discretionary moment where you say, okay, I can either spend another hour at work or I can spend an hour with my family. And I have seen so many entrepreneurs, I've seen so many leaders, I've seen so many ministry leaders who have spent time, effort, energy, money having impact outside of their family that they've lost their family. And I had a really good conversation with my coach and a friend of mine, Kent and Josh, a couple nights ago. And what I realized was that these competing interests of how much time am I spending with my family versus how much time I'm spending in my business, my career, my entrepreneurial journey, I have been so fearful. I've almost created a monster out of growing my career, my business, my entrepreneurial journey further. I've almost created a monster out of that for fear that I would be in such a way that I lose my family. So one of the reasons my impact is not where I want it to be is that I think I've been holding back in a sense from really leaning into the impact that I could have for fear that it becomes this thing that it takes on a life of its own and almost crushes me and my family. And obviously, it doesn't have to be that way. I have full agency. I have full control. I have full decision-making power about how I live my life. It doesn't have to be in order that I have more impact in my life as a whole that it takes a toll on my family. It doesn't have to be that way. But I've been living in such a way in fear that having a bigger impact in life would take a toll on my family. And so I've held back on the impact that I can have. So I think that's the biggest reason, is this competing interest that I wasn't aware of, that to have more impact, it would take a toll on my family. And so I've just held back on doing things that would have more of an impact. What does that look like? Honestly, it looks like scrolling through Facebook a lot more than I want to. I think the story that I tell myself is I don't have time because I have 4 kids and I have a family and I have a business on the side. And that's why I don't have the time to do more stuff. And I think really, honestly, what's true is I've been living in fear of having a bigger impact, taking a toll on my family, that I've not taken the time that I do have to have a bigger impact and done those things. There's 3 books that I have either actually started writing or I have the idea to write. And the latest book I'm most excited about, it's called, what's it called? I just forgot. The Gift of Loneliness. I could have a greater impact in life by starting to write that book, and I haven't. Because I think there's a story that in order for me to write a book that's impactful and makes a difference in people's lives, it's gonna cause my family to suffer, and so I don't start writing the book. Again, that doesn't have to be true, but without realizing that that's a story that I was telling myself and I was living into. And so now that I realize that having a greater impact in life does not have to take a toll on my family, I can choose how this balances out. This is not going to take on a life of its own without me letting it get bigger. So I can have a bigger impact and it not take a toll on my family. Wow. I'm not really sure how long I've been here. Almost an hour. Talking about a lot of stuff that's just been vulnerable to me, and I hope that something has resonated with you. And if you've made it through this point or you join at some point, I would really just ask the question, from what you've heard from me, what's the biggest impact that you're taking away? What resonated most deeply with you? And what can you do with that? What's a small step you can do with that? Have a good night. Tomorrow's Sunday. I'm excited. We get to go to church. Sunday school and church, and Katie's back later tonight, so I'm excited about what's coming. Have a good night, everybody.